On the morning of December 7, 1941, as Japanese aircraft descended upon Pearl Harbor, the United States suffered not only a devastating military blow but also a profound intelligence failure. The attack exposed a harsh reality. America had entered the 20th century's greatest conflict virtually blind, lacking a centralized intelligence apparatus that could match the sophisticated spy networks of Britain, Germany, or the Soviet Union. The American intelligence landscape in 1941 was fragmented and antiquated. The Army's Military Intelligence Division and the Navy's Office of Naval Intelligence operated independently, jealously guarding their limited information and rarely coordinating. The State Department maintained its own small intelligence section, and the FBI handled counterintelligence on American soil. But there was no central agency to collect, analyze, and disseminate intelligence on a global scale, no American equivalent to Britain's Secret Intelligence Service or Germany's Abwehr. This wasn't always an accident of bureaucracy. American political culture had long been suspicious of espionage, viewing it as somehow un-American, a dirty business better left to the shadowy European powers. President Herbert Hoover had famously shut down the State Department's Cryptanalysis Unit in 1929, declaring that, "Gentlemen do not read each other's mail." This principled stance left the nation dangerously vulnerable as storm clouds gathered over Europe and Asia. But war has a way of sweeping aside peacetime scruples. Within months of Pearl Harbor, the United States would create an intelligence organization that would not only help win World War II but also lay the foundation for the Central Intelligence Agency and establish the template for American covert operations for generations to come. This is the story of the Office of Strategic Services, the OSS, and the remarkable man who built it from nothing. Chapter 1. Wild Bill Takes Command. William Joseph Donovan was an unlikely spymaster. Born in 1883 to Irish immigrant parents in Buffalo, New York, he seemed destined for a conventional legal career. A star athlete at Columbia University, he earned his law degree and built a successful practice in Buffalo. But Donovan possessed an restless energy and appetite for adventure that no courtroom could satisfy. During World War I, he commanded the 165th Infantry Regiment, the famous Fighting 69th, with such courage and tactical brilliance that he earned the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, and the nickname Wild Bill. The moniker stuck, though those who knew him well noted the irony. Donovan was actually a careful, methodical thinker who earned his reputation through calculated risk-taking rather than recklessness. After the war, Donovan returned to law and politics, serving briefly as Assistant Attorney General under President Coolidge. But as Europe descended into another world war, Donovan became convinced that the United States needed to prepare for the inevitable conflict. In 1940, President Franklin Roosevelt, who had known Donovan since their days at Columbia, sent him on an informal fact-finding mission to Britain. What Donovan saw in London transformed his understanding of modern warfare. The British were fighting not just with soldiers and ships but with intelligence, deception, propaganda, and sabotage. He met with the chiefs of British intelligence services, the Secret Intelligence Service, MI6, the Security Service, MI5, and the Special Operations Executive, SOE, Churchill's new organization dedicated to setting Europe ablaze through sabotage and subversion. The British shared their methods with remarkable openness, recognizing that American entry into the war was only a matter of time. They showed Donovan their training schools for spies and saboteurs, their techniques for forging documents and creating false identities, their methods for recruiting and running agents behind enemy lines. William Stevenson, the Canadian-born head of British security coordination in New York, became particularly close to Donovan, feeding him intelligence and encouraging his vision of an American Secret Service. Donovan returned to the United States convinced that America needed a centralized intelligence organization immediately. In a lengthy memorandum to President Roosevelt dated June 1941, 6 months before Pearl Harbor, he outlined his vision: a new agency that would collect intelligence through espionage, conduct sabotage and guerrilla operations, spread propaganda, and analyze information from all sources to produce strategic intelligence for policymakers. Roosevelt was intrigued but cautious. The proposal faced fierce opposition from the existing intelligence agencies, particularly the FBI's J. Edgar Hoover, who viewed any new intelligence organization as a threat to his bureau's power and prestige. The military services were equally protective of their turf. But Roosevelt, recognizing the need for better intelligence coordination, created a compromise position in July 1941, Coordinator of Information, COI, with Donovan at its head. The new organization would collect and analyze information but would have limited operational authority. It was a foot in the door, and Donovan knew it. When Pearl Harbor shattered American complacency 5 months later, Donovan was ready with detailed plans for expanding his organization. In June 1942, Roosevelt issued a military order that transformed the COI into the Office of Strategic Services, placing it under the Joint Chiefs of Staff and giving it broad authority for intelligence collection, special operations, and psychological warfare. While Bill Donovan, the lawyer from Buffalo, now commanded America's first centralized intelligence agency. Chapter 2: Building an Organization from Scratch. Creating the OSS from nothing was an organizational challenge of staggering proportions. Donovan needed to recruit personnel, establish training facilities, develop operational methods, build networks in dozens of countries, and do it all while the war raged and every day counted. Donovan's approach to recruitment was unconventional. Rather than relying solely on military personnel or career government officials, he cast a wide net, seeking intelligence, creativity, and expertise wherever he could find them. The result was an organization unlike any in American history, an eclectic mix of Wall Street lawyers, academics, athletes, businessmen, journalists, and socialites, alongside career military officers. The OSS became known, somewhat derisively, as "oh so social," because of the number of wealthy, well-connected individuals in its ranks. But Donovan's method had practical advantages. These individuals had international experience, language skills, and social connections that could open doors around the world. A blue-blood businessman who had spent years in pre-war Shanghai could navigate Chinese politics better than any military intelligence officer reading reports in Washington. Among the notable figures Donovan recruited were Allen Dulles, a Wall Street lawyer and veteran diplomat who would later become CIA director; Arthur Goldberg, a labor lawyer who organized intelligence operations with European trade unions and later became a Supreme Court justice; Julia Child, who worked in OSS Ceylon before becoming America's most famous chef; Sterling Hayden, a Hollywood actor who ran guns to Yugoslav partisans; René Dussac, a Hollywood stuntman who became one of the OSS most daring operatives in France; historian Arthur Schlesinger Jr., who worked in OSS research and analysis; baseball player Moe Berg, who undertook sensitive missions including an aborted plan to assassinate German physicist Werner Heisenberg. The OSS eventually grew to nearly 13,000 personnel by war's end, operating on every continent except Antarctica. Training these diverse recruits presented another challenge. The OSS established numerous training facilities, each specialized for different types of operations. Area B in Maryland trained agents in basic spycraft, surveillance and counter-surveillance, dead drops, secret writing, codes, picking locks, and constructing cover stories. Area F in Virginia specialized in paramilitary training, guerrilla warfare, sabotage, demolitions, silent killing, and weapons handling. The Farm in Maryland focused on maritime operations, training agents to infiltrate enemy coastlines by boat or submarine. Congressional Country Club in Maryland became the OSS Assessment Center, where psychologists evaluated candidates through stress tests, problem-solving exercises, and psychological interviews. This systematic approach to assessment was groundbreaking and influenced personnel selection practices for decades. The curriculum combined techniques learned from the British with American innovations. Instructors included British SOE officers, former Shanghai police officers who taught gutter fighting, and academic psychologists developing new methods for psychological assessment and interrogation. Donovan organized the OSS into several branches. Secret Intelligence (SI) focused on espionage, recruiting agents, gathering information, and building intelligence networks behind enemy lines. Special Operations (SO) conducted sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and support for resistance movements. Research and Analysis RNA employed hundreds of scholars to analyze information from all sources, intercepted communications, prisoner interrogations, captured documents, agent reports, and open sources like newspapers and radio broadcasts. Morale Operations MO conducted black propaganda, materials that appeared to come from enemy sources but were actually created to demoralize or deceive. X2 handled counterintelligence, protecting OSS operations from enemy penetration. This organizational structure reflected Donovan's holistic vision of intelligence, not just collecting secrets, but analyzing them, acting on them, and using information as a weapon. Chapter 3: The Research and Analysis Branch, The Scholars' War. While Commandos and Spies captured popular imagination, the OSS Research and Analysis Branch may have been its most important innovation. Never before had the United States systematically harnessed academic expertise for intelligence purposes on such a scale. Donovan recruited leading scholars from major universities, historians, economists, geographers, anthropologists, psychologists, and area specialists. Many were Jewish refugees from Europe who brought intimate knowledge of German society, politics, and industry. The RNA branch eventually employed over 1,500 people, making it the largest component of the OSS. These scholars worked in dingy offices in Washington, far from the glamour of covert operations, but their work was crucial. They analyzed German and Japanese industrial capacity, identifying bottlenecks and vulnerabilities. They studied transportation networks, mapping the rail lines and roads that moved troops and supplies. They assessed enemy morale through analysis of letters, diaries, and prisoner interrogations. They produced detailed studies of political factions in occupied countries, helping policymakers understand who could be trusted as allies. One of RNA's most important contributions was targeting analysis for the strategic bombing campaign. By studying industrial interdependencies, RNA analysts identified key nodes in the German war economy. Destroying these carefully selected targets, particular factories or rail junctions, could create cascading effects throughout the German industrial system. This analysis helped make bombing more effective and reduce the need for carpet bombing of civilian areas. The RNA branch also produced comprehensive studies for military planners. Before the invasion of North Africa, RNA produced detailed handbooks on Moroccan and Algerian geography, politics, economy, and society. Before D-Day, they created massive studies of French infrastructure, German defenses, and local conditions. These weren't academic exercises but practical tools that helped commanders make life-and-death decisions. The work required innovative research methods. RNA analysts scoured foreign newspapers and journals, monitored radio broadcasts, debriefed refugees, and interrogated prisoners. They created vast card file systems to organize information. When they needed data on German ball-bearing production, they couldn't simply call the German Economics Ministry. They had to piece together clues from trade journals, patent applications, shipping records, and agent reports. One famous RNA project analyzed Japanese urban areas to predict fire damage from incendiary bombing. Using detailed knowledge of Japanese construction methods, population density, and weather patterns, analysts produced maps showing which neighborhoods would burn most readily. This analysis directly influenced the devastating firebombing campaign against Japanese cities in 1945, a contribution that remains ethically controversial. The Research and Analysis branch established a model for intelligence analysis that continues today. The CIA's Directorate of Analysis descends directly from OSS RNA, and many RNA veterans went on to shape Cold War intelligence analysis. Chapter 4: Into Occupied Europe, SI Operations. While researchers analyzed documents in Washington, secret intelligence operatives worked behind enemy lines, building spy networks and gathering information directly from occupied Europe. Infiltrating agents into Nazi-controlled territory was extraordinarily dangerous. The Gestapo and SD, SS intelligence, were ruthlessly efficient at detecting and destroying spy networks. Captured agents faced torture and execution. Yet the OSS managed to establish functioning intelligence networks in France, Italy, Germany, Austria, and even within Nazi Germany itself. Operations in France. The OSS worked closely with British SOE to support the French resistance and gather intelligence before D-Day. Teams of OSS operatives parachuted into France to organize resistance groups, collect information on German defenses, and coordinate sabotage operations. One of the most successful was the Sussex Plan, a joint Anglo-American operation that infiltrated dozens of two-person teams into France in the months before the Normandy invasion. These teams, usually composed of one radio operator and one agent, reported German troop movements, defenses, and fortifications. Their intelligence was crucial for planning the invasion. The OSS also ran networks that gathered economic and political intelligence. Agents cultivated sources among French officials who were technically collaborating with the Germans but secretly feeding information to the Allies. Some of the best intelligence came from French railway workers, who could report German troop movements, and from clerks in German administrative offices who photocopied documents. The Algiers Station. North Africa became a major OSS base after Allied forces captured it in late 1942. From Algiers, the OSS ran operations into southern France, Italy, and the Balkans. The station became a training ground for many OSS officers who would lead major operations later in the war. Penetrating Nazi Germany. Getting agents into Germany itself was incredibly difficult. The population was more homogeneous than occupied territories, making it harder for outsiders to blend in. Police surveillance was intense, and the population's loyalty to the Nazi regime remained strong through most of the war. The OSS had limited success with German operations, but several deserve mention. The Bern station, run by Alan Dulles from neutral Switzerland, became one of the most productive intelligence outposts of the war. Dulles cultivated sources within the German government, military, and intelligence services, Germans who opposed Hitler or could see that Germany was losing and wanted to secure favorable treatment after the war. Dulles's most famous source was Fritz Kolbe, a mid-level German Foreign Office official who provided over 1,600 classified documents. Kolbe's intelligence included information on German military plans, details about the V-weapon program, and insights into internal Nazi politics. British intelligence initially dismissed Kolbe as a plant, but OSS analysis concluded he was genuine, and his intelligence proved invaluable. Another Dulles contact, Hans Bernd-Gisevius, was a German intelligence officer involved in anti-Hitler conspiracies. He provided advance warning of some German operations and insights into the fractured state of Nazi leadership as the war turned against Germany. Operation Sunrise. In early 1945, Dulles became involved in secret negotiations for the surrender of German forces in Italy, Operation Sunrise. SS General Karl Wolff, who commanded German forces in northern Italy, sought to negotiate a separate surrender to avoid further destruction and possibly save himself from war crimes prosecution. The negotiations were delicate and controversial. The Soviets suspected the Western Allies of trying to make a separate peace with Germany, potentially leaving the USSR to fight on alone. Stalin sent furious messages to Roosevelt. Despite the diplomatic complications, Dulles successfully negotiated the surrender of German forces in Italy, which became effective on May 2, 1945, nearly a week before Germany's complete surrender. This potentially saved thousands of lives and preserved Italian cities from last-ditch destruction. Chapter 5: Jedburgh Teams and Special Operations. While secret intelligence focused on espionage, the Special Operations branch conducted sabotage, guerrilla warfare, and support for resistance movements. The most famous SO operations were the Jedburgh missions, three-man teams parachuted into France to organize and lead resistance forces. The Jedburgh concept emerged from discussions between American, British, and Free French planners. Each team consisted of one officer from each nation, ensuring coordination among allies and giving teams credibility with local resistance fighters. Teams included a commander, an executive officer, and a radio operator. Training and preparation. Jedburgh volunteers underwent intensive training in England and Scotland. They learned parachute jumping, demolitions, weapons handling, guerrilla tactics, and radio operation. They studied French geography and practiced their cover stories. Physical conditioning was brutal. Teams needed to survive in hostile territory with limited resources. Many volunteers were young, in their 20s, athletic, and idealistic. Some spoke French fluently because of family background or education. Others barely spoke the language but compensated with technical skills or leadership ability. Operations in France. In the weeks before and after D-Day, 93 Jedburgh teams parachuted into France. They carried weapons, explosives, and gold coins to pay resistance fighters. Their mission was to unite scattered resistance groups, provide military training, coordinate sabotage against German communications and transportation, and call in supply drops. The teams achieved remarkable success. They organized ambushes against German reinforcements trying to reach Normandy. They destroyed rail lines, cutting German supply routes. They tied down German forces that might otherwise have reinforced the invasion beaches. Team Frederick, operating in Brittany, organized over 2,000 French fighters, destroyed numerous bridges and rail lines, and helped liberate several towns. Team Giles organized 3,000 resistance fighters in southern France and accepted the surrender of a German garrison of 500 men. Not all missions succeeded. Some teams landed far from their intended drop zones and spent weeks making contact with resistance groups. Others landed directly into German ambushes, compromised by informers or bad luck. Several Jedburgh officers were killed in action or captured and executed. The Brittany Campaign. OSS teams played a crucial role in the liberation of Brittany in August 1944. As Patton's Third Army raced across France, OSS teams coordinated with French resistance forces to clear German positions, guide Allied units through unfamiliar terrain, and prevent destruction of ports and infrastructure. The port of Brest, heavily defended by German forces, might have required weeks of siege. OSS teams organized resistance fighters who infiltrated German lines, provided intelligence on defenses, and prevented the complete demolition of port facilities. Similar operations occurred at other Brittany ports. Operations in Southeast Asia. OSS special operations extended far beyond Europe. In China, Burma, and Indochina, OSS teams worked with indigenous fighters against Japanese forces. Detachment 101 in Burma became one of the most successful OSS units. Operating in incredibly difficult jungle terrain, it recruited and trained Kachin tribesmen to fight Japanese forces. Led by officers like Karl Eiffeler and Ray Pears, Detachment 101 grew to command over 10,000 indigenous fighters. They conducted guerrilla raids, gathered intelligence, rescued downed Allied pilots, and tied down Japanese forces that might otherwise have fought elsewhere. The unit's success came partly from cultural sensitivity. OSS officers respected Kachin culture and fought alongside their indigenous allies rather than treating them as subordinates. The Kachin proved to be fierce fighters with intimate knowledge of terrain and jungle survival skills that far exceeded American capabilities. The Deer Team and Ho Chi Minh. One of history's intriguing footnotes involves OSS contact with Vietnamese Communist leader Ho Chi Minh. In July 1945, a small OSS team, the Deer Team, parachuted into northern Vietnam to work with Viet Minh guerrillas fighting Japanese occupation. The team, led by Major Archimedes Patty, provided weapons and training to Viet Minh forces and received intelligence on Japanese positions in return. Ho Chi Minh, educated in France and familiar with American ideals, expressed hope that the United States would support Vietnamese independence from French colonial rule after the war. When Japan surrendered, OSS officers attended Vietnamese independence celebrations, and Ho quoted the American Declaration of Independence in his own Declaration of Vietnamese Independence. But larger geopolitical considerations, particularly American support for France as a Cold War ally, meant American support for Vietnamese independence never materialized. This brief cooperation would become tragically ironic decades later. Chapter 6: Morale Operations, the Propaganda War. The OSS Morale Operations Branch waged psychological warfare against the Axis powers, creating black propaganda, materials that appeared to come from enemy sources but were actually fabricated to mislead or demoralize. Unlike white propaganda, which openly identified its source, black propaganda succeeded through deception. The goal was to make enemy soldiers, officials, and civilians believe they were receiving information from their own side, information that would undermine morale, create confusion, or provoke distrust. Techniques and operations. MO operatives created fake German military orders, forged letters from soldiers at the front, fabricated newspapers that appeared to be published by dissidents within Germany, and broadcast radio programs purporting to be from German resistance movements. One operation involved creating fake letters from German soldiers supposedly killed on the Eastern Front. These letters, describing horrible conditions and warning loved ones of inevitable defeat, were mailed to addresses in Germany. The goal was to undermine civilian morale by making Germans believe their own soldiers were losing faith. Another operation created a fake German military newspaper that published real Wehrmacht orders alongside subtly defeatist commentary. The newspaper was smuggled into German units, where some soldiers apparently believed it was genuine. Sauerkraut Operation. One of the most elaborate MO operations targeted German soldiers in Italy. OSS created a fictional German corporal named Willy, supposedly serving on the Eastern Front, who wrote letters to his friend, Tony, serving in Italy. The letters described devastating Soviet attacks, German defeats, Nazi incompetence, and war weariness. These letters were placed in care packages of real captured German mail, and released so they would be delivered to German units in Italy through normal mail channels. Some German soldiers apparently believed they were receiving real letters from comrades, and censorship intercepts showed the letters were being passed around and discussed. Radio operations. MO operated several clandestine radio stations that broadcast into Germany and occupied territories. These stations claimed to be run by various German opposition groups, disaffected Wehrmacht officers, disillusioned Nazi party members, or resistance movements. The broadcasts mix real news, often from BBC or other legitimate sources, with fabricated stories designed to create confusion and distrust. One fictional station, supposedly run by Wehrmacht officers, criticized Nazi leadership while claiming to support the German military, trying to drive a wedge between the army and the Nazi party. Effectiveness. Measuring the effectiveness of psychological operations is notoriously difficult. Did fake letters and radio broadcasts actually undermine German morale, or did they simply annoy enemy censors? The answer is unclear and probably varied by operation and circumstance. Some evidence suggests MO operations had impact. Captured German documents show officials worrying about defeatist materials circulating among troops. German censorship devoted significant resources to detecting and confiscating fake materials, resources that might otherwise have been used more productively. At minimum, MO operations forced Germany to expend effort on internal security and counter-propaganda. At best, they contributed to the erosion of German morale, particularly in the final years of the war when military defeats made propaganda claims more credible. Chapter 7, X2, Counterintelligence and the Double Cross. While most OSS branches focused on offensive operations, X2 played defense, protecting Allied intelligence operations from German penetration and occasionally running double agents against Nazi intelligence services. Origins and Ultra. X2's creation was intimately connected to one of the war's greatest secrets, Ultra, the Allied success in breaking German encrypted communications. British cryptographers at Bletchley Park had cracked the supposedly unbreakable Enigma cipher machines used by German military and intelligence services. This gave the Allies an enormous advantage. They could read German secret communications, but also created a vulnerability. If Germany discovered that Enigma had been compromised, they would change their encryption systems, and the Allies would be blind again. Protecting the ultra-secret became a paramount concern. The British initially hesitated to share ultra-intelligence with the Americans, fearing that American security practices weren't rigorous enough. But as American involvement in the war deepened, sharing became necessary. The British insisted that any American organization receiving ultra-intelligence establish a counterintelligence capability to protect the secret and identify any German penetration of Allied intelligence. This requirement led to the creation of X2 in 1943. The British provided training, shared some techniques, and gave X2 access to ultra-material relevant to German intelligence operations. Mission: X2 had several responsibilities: vetting OSS personnel and agents to ensure they weren't German spies, analyzing German intelligence operations to identify enemy agents and networks, protecting OSS operations from compromise, and occasionally running double agents to feed disinformation to German intelligence. The double-cross system. X2 worked closely with British Security Services 20 Committee, XX or Double Cross, which ran captured German agents as doubles. When German spies were caught in Britain or territories under Allied control, they were given a choice: work for the Allies or face execution as spies. Those who agreed became double agents, continuing to communicate with their German handlers but under Allied control. They sent messages crafted by British and American intelligence, a mix of truthful but harmless information and carefully constructed lies designed to mislead German intelligence about Allied plans and capabilities. The double-cross system achieved remarkable success. By mid-war, British intelligence believed they controlled every German agent in Britain. This gave them extraordinary power. They could feed Germany false information with confidence it would be believed, since Germany had no independent sources to contradict it. Operation Fortitude. The ultimate exploitation of the double-cross system came in 1944 with Operation Fortitude, the deception plan to mislead Germany about where and when the D-Day invasion would occur. The Allies wanted Germany to believe the invasion would come at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point between England and France, rather than Normandy. They created an entirely fictional army group, supposedly commanded by General Patton and preparing to invade at Calais. Double agents reported on this fictional army's preparations. The Allies built fake landing craft and tanks visible to German aerial reconnaissance. Radio traffic mimicked a large force preparing for operations. X2 played a role in ensuring that OSS operations didn't inadvertently contradict the Fortitude deception. They monitored agent reports to ensure consistency with the cover story and helped identify any German intelligence activities that might compromise Allied plans. The deception succeeded brilliantly. Even after Allied forces landed in Normandy, Hitler believed it might be a feint and kept powerful forces at Calais waiting for the real invasion. This tied down German reserves during the critical first weeks when Allied forces were most vulnerable. Hunting German agents *. X2 also worked to identify German agents operating in neutral countries and Allied territories. Using ultra-decrypts of German intelligence communications, they could sometimes identify enemy agents by their cover names or operational details. In Spain and Portugal, X2 worked with local security services and British intelligence to monitor German intelligence operations. They identified German agents attempting to infiltrate into North Africa and France ahead of Allied operations. The Abwehr collapse *. In 1944, Ultra revealed that Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, German military intelligence, had been dismissed and the Abwehr absorbed into the SS intelligence service. This reflected Hitler's increasing distrust of the military and the consolidation of power in SS hands. X2 analysts recognized that this internal upheaval in German intelligence created opportunities. Captured Abwehr officers, facing uncertain fate under SS control, might be more willing to cooperate. The chaos of reorganization might leave gaps in German intelligence coverage. Legacy *. X2's work remained highly classified long after the war because it involved methods, signals intelligence, double agents, and counterintelligence techniques that continued to be useful during the Cold War. When the CIA was created in 1947, X2 veterans played important roles in establishing the agency's counterintelligence staff. Chapter 8: The End of the War and the OSS Demise. By early 1945, The OSS operated around the globe with nearly 13,000 personnel. It had conducted thousands of intelligence operations, supported resistance movements across Europe and Asia, analyzed mountains of data, and contributed significantly to Allied victory. But success brought new challenges. As the war wound down, questions emerged about the OSS future. Should America maintain a peacetime intelligence agency? If so, what should it look like? Bureaucratic battles. The OSS had always faced opposition from established agencies. The FBI's J. Edgar Hoover viewed it as a rival and worked to undermine it. The military intelligence services resented civilian interference in their domain. The State Department worried about spies operating under diplomatic cover damaging America's foreign relations. These agencies fed President Truman, who had succeeded Roosevelt after his death in April 1945, negative stories about the OSS. They emphasized its failures and mistakes while downplaying its successes. They portrayed Donovan as an empire builder more interested in bureaucratic power than effective intelligence. Some of their criticisms had merit. The OSS had made mistakes. Some operations failed spectacularly. The organization's rapid growth led to personnel problems. Not everyone Donovan recruited proved competent or trustworthy. The mixture of military personnel, academics, and socialites sometimes created cultural friction. But the criticisms also reflected bureaucratic self-interest. The FBI wanted to reclaim Latin American operations that Roosevelt had given to the OSS. Military intelligence wanted to absorb OSS capabilities into their own organizations. The State Department wanted intelligence under its control. Truman's decision. Truman, far less enamored with intelligence operations than Roosevelt had been, proved receptive to the OSS critics. In September 1945, just weeks after Japan's surrender, he signed an executive order abolishing the OSS effective October 1, 1945. The decision was abrupt and poorly planned. The OSS functions were scattered among existing agencies. Research and analysis went to the State Department. Secret Intelligence and X2 went to the War Department's new Strategic Services Unit. Special operations capabilities were largely disbanded. Thousands of OSS personnel returned to civilian life. Donovan was devastated. He had proposed a plan for a permanent peacetime intelligence agency, but Truman rejected it. Wild Bill returned to his law practice, his vision of an American intelligence service apparently dead. The intelligence vacuum. But Truman soon discovered that abolishing the OSS created problems. The world didn't become peaceful and simple after 1945. The Soviet Union, America's wartime ally, quickly became its primary adversary. Communist parties threatened to take power in Western Europe. Civil wars erupted in Greece and China. The emerging Cold War required intelligence capabilities. The scattered former OSS elements couldn't provide coordinated intelligence. The State Department's Research and Analysis Unit produced good analysis but had no collection capability. The Strategic Services Unit could collect intelligence but struggled without analytical support. The military services focused on tactical military intelligence but provided little strategic warning about political developments. The road to CIA. Recognizing the problem, Truman created the Central Intelligence Group in January 1946 to coordinate intelligence from various agencies. But the CIG lacked clear authority and struggled with the same bureaucratic rivalries that had plagued the OSS. Finally, in 1947, Congress passed the National Security Act, creating the Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA inherited many OSS functions, methods, and personnel. Allen Dulles, who had run the Bern Station, became CIA director in 1953. Numerous other OSS veterans shaped the CIA's early years. The CIA was different from the OSS in important ways. It was established by law rather than presidential decree, giving it more stability. It focused primarily on peacetime intelligence rather than wartime special operations. It reported to the National Security Council rather than military commanders. But the continuity was also striking. The CIA's structure, separate divisions for intelligence collection, analysis, covert operations, and counterintelligence, echoed the OSS. Its training methods drew heavily on OSS experience. Its early operations in Europe often built on OSS networks and contacts. #Conclusion. Legacy of the OSS. The OSS existed for only 3 years and 1 month, from June 1942 to October 1945. Yet its impact on American intelligence and military operations extended far beyond this brief existence. Immediate contributions to victory. The OSS contributions to Allied victory, while sometimes exaggerated by veterans and difficult to quantify precisely, were significant. Intelligence from OSS networks helped planners prepare for major operations from North Africa to Normandy to the Pacific Islands. OSS Special Operations teams supported resistance movements, conducted sabotage, and tied down enemy forces. Research and analysis provided strategic intelligence that shaped military and diplomatic decisions. Psychological operations contributed to eroding enemy morale. Counterintelligence protected Allied operations and deceived enemy intelligence. Historians debate which OSS operations were most valuable. Some argue that RNA's analytical work provided the most consistent value. Others point to special operations that achieved tactical success. The truth is probably that different operations mattered in different contexts. No single mission won the war, but the cumulative effect of hundreds of operations made America more effective in prosecuting the conflict. Institutional legacy. The OSS' most important legacy was institutional. It established the template for American intelligence capabilities and demonstrated that the United States could conduct sophisticated intelligence operations. Before the OSS, American intelligence was fragmented, tactical, and reactive. The OSS showed that intelligence could be centralized, strategic, and proactive. It demonstrated that analysis was as important as collection. It proved that covert action could be a tool of national policy. It established methods for personnel selection, training, and operations that continue to influence intelligence agencies today. The CIA, created just 2 years after the OSS abolition, inherited not just personnel and methods but also the fundamental concept that Donovan had championed: intelligence as a coordinated enterprise combining collection, analysis, covert action, and counterintelligence under centralized direction. Cultural impact. The OSS also changed American culture in subtle ways. Before World War II, espionage was viewed with suspicion, not quite respectable, certainly not a career path for educated Americans. The OSS made intelligence work seem glamorous and patriotic. Journalists like Stuart Alsop and historians like Arthur Schlesinger Jr. had served in the OSS and wrote about it with admiration. The agency attracted educated, accomplished people who might otherwise have pursued academic or business careers. This cultural shift had lasting effects. Throughout the Cold War, intelligence agencies could recruit from elite universities, something that would have been nearly impossible before the OSS established that espionage could be an honorable profession for gentlemen and scholars. Unresolved questions. The OSS legacy also includes controversies and unresolved questions that remain relevant today. Was it worth it? The OSS cost approximately $135 million during the war. Not enormous by wartime standards, but significant. Did it provide intelligence and capabilities that justified this investment, or could the money have been better spent on ships, planes, and armies? The answer depends partly on counterfactuals we can never verify. How much longer might the war have lasted without OSS operations? Ethics of covert operations. The OSS conducted operations that raised ethical questions, supporting guerrillas who committed atrocities, distributing misleading propaganda, planning assassinations, though most were never executed. These activities, justified by the context of total war against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan, established precedents for peacetime covert operations during the Cold War. Were those precedents wise? Intelligence and democracy. Can a secret intelligence agency function properly within a democracy? The OSS operated with minimal congressional oversight. Most members of Congress didn't even know it existed. This lack of accountability made the agency more agile but also more vulnerable to abuse. The tension between operational secrecy and democratic accountability, first raised by the OS. Thanks for watching. If you found this story interesting, please subscribe and like it, and join our community of history lovers. We want to hear your voice. Leave a comment on the video, tell us where you come from, or share any family history related to the war. You are not just a spectator, you are helping us spread the truth about the heroism of the war years. We read every comment, and they really inspire us to work. See you next time.